What's up, guys? It's Craig here, and welcome to my second video in my fascinating chess positions series. Today, we're going to look at a structure that is reached from a sideline of a sideline. So this structure is not very popular at all. And I came across this structure when doing analysis of a game that I played from the recent Southwest Class 2024 in Dallas. And when you come across a structure like this in a game that you're not familiar with, you won't really have as many ideas in the well to pull from, and your intuition isn't going to help you as much as your over the board thinking, basically. What plan you can come up with over the board, how well you understand what each side's ideas are, basically just your overall positional skills. And in this position, it is black to move, and if you wanted to pause the video now, it would be a great time to do so. But basically, try to come up with an idea, an understanding of the position, and ultimately a move to play. All right, so the move that I like best in this position is a strange random looking move, a6. Now, the ideas behind this move, in my opinion, there's actually four. So the first idea, and this is not really an idea, but a justification, is that the position is pretty stable, and it's stable enough that we can afford the tempo on such a move. White's not breaking through anywhere for the moment, and the only way that White is trying to claim the advantage right now, I mean, I guess it's like quite significant to the position, but White's trying to claim the advantage through space. He's trying to solidify his space advantage, basically. And so due to the stable nature of the position, we can afford the time to play such a move like a6. Secondly, we actually are, after a6, tactically threatening to play knight takes d5. So, for example, on a random move, h4 is a bit random, but let's say h3, we have this move knight takes d5. And the reason that a6 is important is that after c takes d5, bishop takes d4, there is no longer this move bishop to b5. Oops, clicking random things. There's no longer this move bishop to b5, attacking our rook, attacking our bishop, and getting a really good position as it would have before if we tried to play knight takes d5 instead of a6. The third idea is that in the structure, let's say after another random move, let's say h3 again here we would have knight takes d5, but just for example purposes, in the structure after e takes d5, e takes d5 c6, d takes d6, knight takes c6. It's pretty clear that the move a6 is useful because the knights would have wanted to jump to this b5 square to target this weak d6 pawn, but now it's shown that a6 is kind of like a hedgehog structure type move where we're preventing the knight on b5, and hopefully at some point we can get this move d5 into completely equalized, and maybe even black can take over the game from there. And the last idea is that in the future, we could play this move c5 in the future, and then we have this Benko type break with b5. We might play this move c6 in the future. Stuff gets traded maybe on d5 or something, and eventually we get this move b5 in anyway, just to, really undermine the center. Or we might simply get a structure like right away where we can just simply play b5. And again, we're trying to undermine the center. So like a6 is also useful in that pretty much no matter what structure we come across or we choose to play, depending on what white plays, whether it's first d5, c6, or kind of like keeping the structure for now, this b5 move being available to us will always be useful. So, okay, let's continue the line for now. White's best move, in my opinion, here is bishop g5. And the reason for this is that the fight is all over this d5 square. As I mentioned before, white is trying to claim a space advantage. Basically, the way white's trying to get an advantage was by claiming he has more space. And so the battle revolves around if white can keep his space advantage, then white will be better. And if black is successful in breaking the center apart or getting counterplay elsewhere, then black will be at least fine. And so with bishop g5, white is indirectly fighting to keep that space advantage via this pawn on d5, which is basically the main, I guess, like pawn that helps white gain space in the position. Obviously, the another idea is that knight takes d5. This tactical move is no longer possible, obviously because of the pin on the queen. And lastly, it will not really be too wise for black to play something like h6 and g5 because this pawn on e6 plays an incredible role now in keeping this f5 square on lock. It can't ever move to e5 because then f5 will be chronically weak. And otherwise, we've really just like weakened our light squares here on the king side for not much reason at all. And h6 g5 is just a huge just like weakness on the black king side. So it's not really something that white has to be worried about when he plays bishop to g5. And so instead, black would play actually h6 to start with is perfectly reasonable move, bishop h4. And I like this move c5 for black, and it's the main move that I analyzed. Um, Again, the entire fight is revolving around black trying to either get counterplay or chip away at this d5 pawn in the center. And so one of the natural things that comes to mind is we might want to take here and just like pressure the center immediately. I think because of this bishop on h4, and now we really are quite unable to go g5 because after bishop g3, this f5 square will always be chronically weak in this structure. Um, yeah, after c6, white can simply just play rook c1, and again, like this pin is not going away. So this d5 pawn is safe here, and this d5 pawn being safe means that with all the minor pieces on the board, black's pieces are simply performing not as well as white's minor pieces, and so white can claim at least a slight advantage here. And so the move I like better is this move c5. And if white decides to take on c6 and I take c6, white has removed the pride and joy of his position, this d5 pawn, from the board, and also helped black develop with tempo. And this is really not the end of the world, but black has at least equalized here. So this is not particularly what white is going for. And so the question for white now is where to move the knight. And there are two reasonable spots, in my opinion. And those are c2 and f3. And they both have different ideas, and black will respond differently to them um, based on whatever way the knight chooses. And so actually, I want you guys to, if you're treating this as a puzzle, to pause the video and think about what black's plan should be or where black's play should come from in light of, or in case of knight c2, and where black's play and what his response should be in case of knight f3, if you wanted to pause. All right, so let's say black goes, or white goes knight c2. The first question to ask is, what does white want? Like, if it were white's turn again, what would white want out of the position? Or where is the knight on c2 planning to go? Like, where is it planning to fit in? And the answer is that white, if it were his turn again, would actually want to play this move d takes e6. So let's say we play something like knight bd7. This move d takes e6 is actually quite strong. And the reason for this is after rook takes e6, this f3 move is available. And you can see I already have the arrows drawn in. This knight is jumping to e3, which is a perfect square to eye this d5 hole in black's position. And this bishop is coming back to f2, just kind of chilling, guarding the d4 square. And white really has no weaknesses, and black will be left always with this huge d6 weakness. And white has more space, white's pieces are doing better, and white can claim a very solid advantage here. And so instead, we can think about what the knight doesn't do on c2 that it would have done on f3, and that is actually control the e5 square. And so what we want to do first is we will take on d5, and after e takes d5, we go knight bd7. And our plan now is actually very simple. We want to go knight e5 on the next move. If we could trade on d3, that would actually be fantastic for us. We get the two bishops. We can reroute this light squared bishop back to maybe f5 or something. And if not, let's say something like h3 or something, knight e5, bishop e2. This knight will find a very nice home actually now on g6. and I already have the arrows drawn in here again. The difference now is that f5, like this bishop is not on d3, and there's no knight on like d4 to really take advantage of f5. We also have more pieces on the king side for black. And so our next two moves, or two or three moves, as you can see, is bishop c8, helping to control this f5 square, then getting our last piece into the game with rook a7 to e7. And our pieces will be extremely harmonious, and black will be fine with the game in front of him. Let's go back, and let's say white plays this move instead, knight to f3. Now, if we try to go down this line of e takes d5, e takes d5, knight b d7, this is not as good because now the e5 square is covered, and so we will no longer have this plan of knight e5, g5, and knight g6. And so black can simply play a move like maybe a4 here, just making sure this b5 break never happens. And white is just kind of chilling here. And so what we do want to go instead, though, however, is, or the difference instead is that compared to knight c2, now after knight f3, white can no longer play this f3 move, bolstering down the e4 pawn like we saw with the knight c2 line. And so here it's actually okay to go knight b d7, and we are not scared of d takes e6. Because after rook takes e6, we do have pressure on this e4 pawn. F3 is not available. This knight actually kind of sucks on f3, so we are quite chilling there. And so what white might try to do instead after knight b d7 is some move like h3, which comes as a response or like prophylaxis against g5 and knight h5 happening to maybe try to nab off this g3 bishop. And so here's another moment where you can try to think with black, where is my play going to come from? Because white still has this pawn on d5 representing his space advantage. You can try to think, where is black's play going to come from, and maybe a move associated with this. All right, so I looked at two different plans, actually three different plans that black could try to come up with. Two of them are associated with the same move. The first move that I think makes a lot of sense here is this move g5. And the idea behind g5 is we simply want this knight on d7 to come around to g6 just to put more pieces on the king side. I think this is the riskier of the two moves that we could play, but it's still totally fine if this is the way that we wanted to play the position. So g5, bishop g3, knight f8. We have weakened our king side here, so white might try to play something like knight d2 to maybe try to get this f4 move in. We go knight g6, and white might try to play something like a4 maybe to both bolster down b5 and maybe get this rook a3 move in, where eventually you could see potentially this rook sliding along to the king side and trying to put pressure on black's position. Overall, it's just double-edged. Really, the evaluation doesn't particularly matter in a position like this if it's between 0.5 and minus 0.5, just because, there's not a clear side that's better. Both sides have their play, and whoever is the better player will likely outplay their opponent. The other move that I actually like better is this move queen c7. And the first point of this move is we want to improve this knight to this f4 square. And actually, even this h5 square for the knight is a fantastic square because it kind of dominates this h4 bishop to where if we play knight h5, we are threatening g5. And also, like as I mentioned, like f4 is a brilliant square for the knight to potentially go to in the future. And so the other plan is queen c7 helps support this b5 break in a Benko style, where after b5, c takes b5, we do have this c4 move. And that opens up this c5 square for this knight, and all of our pieces will be playing in that case. And so after h3, queen c7, I have analyzed many moves here, but actually 6 different moves here in the position, and all of them lead to kind of interesting and different positions like a4, queen d2, rook e1. The move I want to analyze just to go down this one line for this video is this move d takes e6. Kind of with a similar idea to if the knight was on c2. Black's idea, or white's idea is to play knight d2. Bolster down, oops, bolster down this e4 pawn. Wow, I really messed up twice there. Bolster down this e4 pawn, and maybe either play f3, or more likely f4 and f5. And here I think is the most impressive moment of the video. If you want to stop and try to find black to move, how would you try to basically deal with this f4, f5 idea? All right, so I think the only way that you were able to find this next move for black is to understand where the two black rooks are best placed. And if that gives you a hint and you want to try to pause the video again, go ahead. But the two black rooks are best placed in order to deal with f4, f5 on f8 and e8. And the fastest way to get them there is this move rook f8, so that we can get rook f8 and rook e8 in two moves. Otherwise, it just simply takes more moves. And after f4, we step back with rook e8. F5 no longer comes with tempo, and white is kind of stalled for the moment. And after something like a4, again, potentially this idea rook a3 and sliding the rook across the third rank eventually, not to mention bolstering down this b5 break, we are getting our counterplay with black with this move knight h5. And after knight h5, something like knight f4 is threatened, bishop d4 is threatened. Even like we could play something like bishop takes c3 in the future, followed by knight g7 f5, try to open this long diagonal. And if we really wanted to go farther with this, like this queen, in order to get out of this knight d5, I guess attack eventually, we might even place this shit on a8 just to again put more pressure on the long diagonal. If something like knight d5 right now, we can always just take, bishop b2, rook b1, bishop d4 check, and we are at least fine with black. We might even go bishop e3 next and be better here, actually. But yeah, that is kind of just a quick look into this structure that I analyzed. I really liked these moves, a6, as well as understanding that knight f3 we don't take on d5, whereas knight c2, because white's plan is to take on e6 and bolster the pawn down with f3, here we do take on d5, given that this e5 square is open. We can play g5 and knight g6. And the move I really liked at the end, again here, was d6, rook e6, knight d2, and this move, beautiful move, rook f8, just to get the rooks where they belong on f8 and e8. And again, after all of these positions, because we're playing black here, the position will usually never be better for us, but at least we have a playable position, and that's kind of what we're looking for out of the opening. And yeah, that's it from me. I hope you enjoyed this video, and see you here next time.